Oh, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. I have to say to you that of all the past presentations of the Leonard Simons Award, we were able to share this award presentation with Mary Lou Zeev, who was often one of the people making the presentation or participating by telling us about her beloved father, Leonard Simons. Mary Lou's not able to be with us this afternoon. She is recovering from her COVID shot, not feeling wonderful, but we miss you, Mary Lou. And I look forward to seeing your great smile, hearing your wonderful sense of humor, and at some point in the future, giving you an actual hug. And so I'll stand in as best I can for her today. Mary Lou was herself a Leonard Simons awardee, and she is, of course, a longtime member, Jewish Historical Society of Michigan. This year's awardee will be the 30th person to receive this prestigious award, the highest award given by the Jewish Historical Society of Michigan. First given in 1991, the Leonard Simons History Maker Award honors those who have made outstanding contributions to the enrichment, the conservation, the knowledge, and dissemination of Michigan Jewish history. Mr. Simons was the founder of the Simons Michelson Zeev advertising agency. The award continues his passion for the preservation of Jewish and communal history. Leonard Simons established the Jewish Community Archives at the Jewish Federation of Metro Detroit. He supported the publication of our annual scholarly journal, Michigan Jewish History, and he promoted and fostered the pride he felt in this Jewish community. He was an active leader of the Federation, of the Detroit Historical Society, of our own Jewish Historical Society of Michigan, and his name is on the building of the Wayne State University Press, an entity he held dear. Today's awardee, Feiga Weiss, embodies all of the contributions to history and to the community that Leonard Simons promoted. On behalf of the Leonard Simons Committee of the Jewish Historical Society of Michigan, it's my pleasure to award the 2020 Leonard Simons History Maker Award to Feiga Weiss. Now, if you thought she said 2020, that is correct. Feiga Weiss is the 2020 awardee. Because of the pandemic, we were not able to do this in 2020, so we're happy to do it now. When I first approached Feiga and asked her for her bio and for her to tell me about herself, it was not easy for me to get information about her. Feiga is modest. She doesn't want to speak about herself, but she is passionate about her work, as you will soon see. Her colleagues at the Holocaust Memorial Center describe her as dedicated, hardworking, knowledgeable, and serious about her work. Feiga began her work at the Holocaust Center in 1984 when the museum opened. She came from the Library of Congress and has been the archivist and caretaker of the Holocaust Center archive ever since. The Holocaust Memorial Archive has many collections. I'll just mention three: the Federation of Jewish Child Survivors of the Holocaust, the Ritchie Boys collection, and the Hungarian microfilm collection. Under her care, the archive has a national and international reputation. Her knowledge of several languages, her expertise with Holocaust books and artifacts serves the community well. The archive is a resource for survivors, researchers, genealogists, historians, educators, and others. The Jewish Historical Society of Michigan is privileged to present Feiga Weiss with the 2020 Leonard Simons History Maker Award. Feiga, we're looking forward to your presentation. On behalf of the grateful community, we thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you all for attending. I'd like to start by saying that the Talmud says that every place is blessed with its own charm. Chen hamakom al yoshveha. When I first came to Detroit a few years ago, I remember that I immediately felt the charm of this community. Since then, I've had the privilege to interact with so many individuals and institutions, and I can say that there is a certain warmth, caring attitude, generosity, and sense of purpose that permeates the atmosphere in the Detroit metropolitan area. Although I never met Mr. Leonard Simons, it is clear that he felt a great sense of responsibility to the community. It was his wish to establish historical legacies of the Holocaust, Jewish community, and the community about which he cared so deeply. I came to the Holocaust Memorial Center, as Jeannie told you, the day after the museum opened. We were located on the campus of the Jewish Community Center in West Bloomfield, and although the museum had just opened and the visitors had begun to visit, the library shelves were empty and just about all the artifacts were displayed. Rabbi Rosenzweig, of blessed memory, knew that in order to perpetuate the history that had to be learned from the Holocaust and to teach positive lessons from the unprecedented horror, we had to document what happened in as many ways as possible. Unless there was documentation, the history would be watered down, whitewashed, sugar-coated, and even worse, the history would be twisted and ultimately denied. We see how true this is today. Rabbi Rosenzweig gave instructions to collect printed materials, artifacts, and oral histories in 3 areas: Holocaust, European Jewish history throughout time, and Jewish ethnic relations. I should start by telling you that the 1980s ushered in a new era of research, analysis, and an explosion of literature on what happened during the years 1939 to 1945. Survivors who, in order to continue living in a normal fashion, had to first put aside their searing memories to build new lives here. But by the 1980s, they had the wherewithal to reflect, build, and memorialize. Our center was established by the Certificiate, the Detroit Holocaust Survivors Organization. Many survivors published personal narratives, recorded their oral histories, and the few objects they owned began to surface, creating a veritable storehouse of documentation. The Holocaust Memorial Center was the first freestanding Holocaust museum in America, and as such, it was the logical place where people were able to deposit their memorabilia. The Holocaust Memorial Center Archive has always pursued and collected as much written and oral documentation and materials as we can. We are now at a point where many survivors, liberators, eyewitnesses are no longer with us. Not everyone was able to talk about their experiences or could not or would not elaborate on the horrific details. After World War II, the overwhelming majority of survivors had nothing, just their memories. But some objects did surface, and on careful deliberation, some survivors felt it was best to donate them to an institution that would use their objects to teach the world what happened to them. They felt they owed this to their loved ones and the world. They did not want their history to repeat itself. It was suggested that I tell you about some exceptional objects that were donated to the center. These items will give you a glimpse into life during those times and some of the challenges the previous generation endured. I'll mention a few and give you a brief explanation about the origin of each. So I'm going to show you a power presentation. And we'll start with a collection of materials from Emma Shaver. Emma Shaver was an internationally known opera star from Detroit. She was commissioned by the World Jewish Congress to be part of a delegation that was sent to Europe to visit the concentration camps not long after liberation. As a singer with an exceptional voice, she went into the camps and sang Yiddish songs to the broken survivors. This album contains letters of appreciation to Mrs. Shaver and photos from the numerous displaced persons camps she visited. Excuse me a second. This is the cover. It's beautiful. And it's not too big, but there are many pictures included here. Here's one sample page. Here you have the letter of appreciation from the Jewish community in Munich. And here on the opposite page, you see a picture of Emma Shaver at the piano. And if you look a little bit to the right, you'll see the hundreds of people who are dressed very nicely. They had already had the opportunity to eat food on a regular basis, and they don't look like the survivors that you find at the gates of the concentration camp. The next item is a hat that was made in the Buchenwald concentration camp by a survivor for Charles Frederick Sassanella of Port Huron. They did not know each other, and the survivor, who obviously was very talented, took whatever scraps of material he could find and made this little hat, which he also called a yarmulke, out of horsehair and any material that came to him. The next item I'd like to show you is a little shoe that was worn by a little person in the Barnum and Bailey Ringling Brothers Circus. This shoe belonged to Leah Graf, originally Leah Schwartz, a 27-inch tall little person born in Baden-Baden, Germany in 1913. Leah was a German Jewish national who worked in the circus for a short time. Her father was not tall, but he was not a little person, but her mother was. In 1935, she went back to visit her parents, and in 1937, she and her parents were arrested because of their height and their Jewish origin. They were taken to the Oranienburg concentration camp, then Dachau, used for medical experimentation, and then murdered in Auschwitz. This shoe came to us from a lady in Dearborn whose father worked with Leah in the circus. His name was Alfred Langevin and was known for blowing smoke from his eyes. Here is a picture of Leah on Alfred's shoulder at a Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey circus picnic. The next item we have is a very small manuscript that was given to us by a local resident from West Bloomfield. This is an evening prayer manuscript written in 1735 for Gittla, the wife of Rabbi Weil of Mannheim, Germany. It was a treasure of the Jewish community of Wassenaar, Netherlands, which was a small community right outside The Hague. When the Jews of Wassenaar were being deported, the rabbi of Wassenaar approached the daughter of the Wassenaar mayor, who happened to be a friend of his own daughter, and he slipped this very small prayer book into her hand. He told her, "If we do not return, please give this to the first Jew you can trust. No one returned. After the war, a Jewish brigade soldier was assigned to take the mayor's daughter, who was now a nurse, to the hospital daily. After a year, this nurse gave the prayer book to the soldier. The soldier kept it, gave it to his son, who lives in West Bloomfield, and he gave it to our center. This is the inside of the manuscript. And at the back of the Ma'ariv prayer books, the evening prayer books, he has the Seder HaOmer, the number of the days of counting between Passover and Shavuos. The next group of items that I'd like to share with you is a group of toys that were found in a concentration camp by Ritchie boy, Paul Rabinek. Paul Rabinek was a Ritchie boy who served with our own Professor Guy Stern, the director of the Holocaust Memorial Center, Institute of the Righteous. Paul passed away at an early age, and his two youngest daughters, twins, did not remember their father. Professor Stern remembered him very well because the two of them trained and served together in Germany. Professor Stern gave these twins and other members of the family many stories about Paul as a soldier, an interrogator, a mechanic, entrepreneur, and someone who kept the H for Hebrew on his dog tag. That was a sense of pride. Professor Stern gave these twins, who are now mothers, and their families a legacy that they will remember and pass on to the next generations. It is not clear in which concentration camp the children found these children's items were found, but the artifacts speak for themselves. And Professor Stern was responsible for giving the Rabinek family a history that they will treasure forever. The albums that you see here next belong to Major Warren Lambert from Pontiac and were donated to our center by his grandson. Major Lambert served as a judge at the war crime trials held in Dachau. The trials were not necessarily for war criminals who worked in Dachau, but also for the Nazis who served in numerous other camps, such as Buchenwald, Flossenburg, Dürrenmatt, Nordhausen, and others. The covers were painted by a survivor, and Mr. Frobus, who himself was a survivor and was subjected to awful experimentation. These photograph albums showing the defendants waiting their turn to speak, testifying, and photos of court reporters. But one of the most interesting items in this collection is the little notebook in which Mayor Lambert wrote notes as the defendants and witnesses spoke. His notes are often very graphic and very painful to read. And at times, Major Lambert writes liar, as you see here, as a personal comment. In the early years of the Holocaust Memorial Center, a Mr. Walter Seligson from Oak Park presented the Holocaust Memorial Center with 2 albums documenting his wartime experiences. He received his engineering degree in Germany and shortly after went to France to find work. His family fled to Palestine and he joined them a short time later because he wasn't able to find a job. From Palestine, he moved to the United States, and in the late 1930s, he joined the US Army, where citizenship waiting and other requirements were waived, and he automatically became a US citizen. With his knowledge of German, French, Hebrew, and English, he became a translator for the Army. As the Nuremberg trials were being established, he was assigned the job of supervising the translators. Walter Seligson was present at all the trials of the major war criminals. He told his family that he was sometimes shocked to realize that many of the Nazi leaders came from ordinary backgrounds, were simple, and sometimes not too intelligent. He was amazed that rude, crude people could get to such high positions where they yielded horrific power. This is a quote from his daughter. The albums he donated allowed one to relive the events of the day through documentation, photographs, and brochures, and so many other items he carefully saved. Here are denaturalization certificates for Einstein and his own, Walter Seligson. Excuse me. Here is a blank form where Belgian citizens were supposed to list their property. When the Jews received these, they knew they were marked and they went into hiding as soon as possible. And here is a Belgian star that he also put into his album. I'll go back. The last item I'd like to share with you is from Professor Arnold Joseph, who was born in Germany in 1927. He, his mother, and brother emigrated to the United States because life became very difficult in Nazi Germany. Professor Joseph joined the US Army and was assigned to the Office of Censor with 3 others to read the letters sent to the major defendants on trial for war crimes. He was in Nuremberg from January 46 to mid-1948. What amazed Professor Joseph was that the war criminals who were accused of the worst crimes imaginable wrote such affectionate letters to their families, telling them how much they missed them and how they were being treated so cruelly by the authorities. The letters they received in return were just as warm and touching. And to quote Professor Joseph, "What struck me most was the discrepancy between these letters and the feelings they reveal, and then the signatures of these very men on documents, condemning hundreds of and thousands of people to slave labor and death." So here we see letters to Hermann Goering, again, Albert Speer, Rudolf Hess, Julia Streicher, and one very interesting letter written to him by the father of one of your murdered children. One of your children who were murdered, excuse me. All the books, archives, artifacts, artwork that we assembled are evidence that will last for generations. We must carefully preserve them. Should they disappear, we play into the hands of Holocaust deniers. There is nothing more advantageous to these revisionists than to lose, forget, or allow the materials to deteriorate. To quote Chief Justice Jackson at the International Military Tribunals, he said, "These prisoners represent sinister influences that will lurk in the world long after their bodies have returned to dust." It's easy to create a generic Holocaust museum, but the Holocaust Memorial Center goal is to include as many Michigan Holocaust oral history testimonies, artifacts, archival records as we have available. We found that incorporating Michigan-based personal narratives and memorabilia has a profound impact on our visitors. It brings the lessons of the Holocaust home in a most personal way. Now is the time to bring awareness to the public that the World War II items that have been sitting in drawers, attics, and basements might have educational, historical value with the potential to better lives and the society in which we live. When donors come in and tell me the background of the materials that are being donated, I feel privileged to hear their stories, and at the same time, I am humbled and inspired. Today's children may never hear directly the survivors, liberators, or righteous individuals who put their and their families' lives on the line. Although it is sometimes very difficult to hear emotionally charged narratives, these are precisely the histories that we need to digest and make part of our lives. And this is why the Holocaust Memorial Center collects them, provides appropriate housing, and catalogs all the different kinds of materials in our holding. This is our mission. We are obligated and proud to be able to provide impactful lessons to the public. If anyone here has any materials that would enhance the work we do, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you all for attending. On behalf of the Holocaust Memorial Center and myself, we express our sincere appreciation to the Leonard Simons Archive Committee and the Jewish Historical Society of Michigan for providing this wonderful opportunity. To paraphrase what Elie Wiesel said, those who were here, those who were there can't begin to describe the Holocaust. Those who weren't there never will be able to do so. Nevertheless, as inheritors of that legacy, it is still our responsibility to document and preserve everything we can for those who are murdered, for humanity today, and for generations to come. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Feiga. I'm Catherine Kangany, JHSM's Executive Director. We are so honored to be able to give you the Leonard N. Simons Award for 2020, such a well-deserved honor. Thank you for that very moving presentation. I invite attendees to submit questions through the Q&A feature, and I will be happy to read those out as they come in. So the Q&A feature can be found if you're on a laptop. You can find it at the bottom of the screen by the chat feature.
Katie, I'm not able to open that area.
Okay, if it's easier for you all to submit questions through the chat, either to everyone or directly to me, feel very free to do that if that's easier. First question that's come in, is Guy the only living Ritchie boy?
No, as far as I know. I can ask him when he comes in.
Do you translate letters received from people who died in the Holocaust?
It depends. We have translated a few items and we put them on display. But if someone has letters that they need to be translated for their own personal use, we have a list of translators that are willing and able, depending on the language, to translate.
Do you have anyone to help you in the library? What is a typical day like for you?
I have one assistant. Her name is Judy Rosenzweig. She does the cataloging. And we also have the services of Kevin Bracco, who's helping us with all of our technical matters. In addition, before COVID, we had a group of about 7 volunteers. Each one was assigned a specific task, And they did magnificent work on their own time, coming to the library at staggered hours so that we wouldn't all be there at once. So we had a group, I would say, of close to 10 people, and we got our work done. With COVID, we are behind. We hope to catch up sometime in the near future.
Will you accept items that are not directly related to the greater Detroit community?
Each item needs to be, well, I interview the person who's giving the item, get the connection to the Holocaust. And yes, we would accept items that are not from the Detroit Jewish community or any Detroit or Michigan person, but we like to get the background. And it's very important to get the documentation surrounding the item.
What languages do you speak?
The better question is, what languages can I work with? I do know English, Hebrew, Yiddish. I do work with a little bit of Russian, a little bit of German, and a little bit of French. And that's not enough. I know no Hungarian, unfortunately.
Please tell us about the Yizkor book collection.
The Memorial Book Collection, or Yizkor Book Collection, is a group of books that were written for the most part by survivors, survivor organizations, and individuals about a particular place. We have in our collection about 1,600 individual towns that are represented in this collection. They're listed on our website on the library page. For the most part, we only keep one copy. Many of them have appeared scanned on different websites, and we also collect translations. Those translations are from the Jewish Genealogy Yizkor Books in Print project, and we collect as many as we can. We also have a rather large collection of German memorial books that were very often produced by the cities in which those people once lived, and they're wonderful. Not that the other ones are not, but they have done exceptional jobs, including finding out where the survivors went after the war. So we have a rather, I would say, impressive collection. And when people call, they sometimes want to know if we have a book on their town. And of course we check and we make them available to the person.
When non-Jews from Germany were coming to assist you, what was their impact?
Would you repeat the question?
When non-Jews from Germany were coming to assist you, what was their impact?
We have or had a group of volunteers who came from Germany. And I have to say that they were so understanding. They were, first of all, they were prepped for working at the Holocaust Memorial Center. And they came with a very positive attitude. And their knowledge of German was first rate, of course. So it was a good experience for them. It was a good experience for us. And I think that when the German volunteers went back to Germany, they were ambassadors of education for Holocaust education.
How have you worked in the past with the Jewish Genealogical Society of Michigan?
We work hand in hand. We have the same goals. And many years ago, the Holocaust Memorial Center agreed to have their books part of our collection. We keep them separately. They have their own catalog on their website, and they have their own cataloging system. But if we don't have a particular book, we go over to their collection to see whether we can pick it up and have it available for the reader who's requesting it.
Can you tell us about the Hungarian microfilm collection?
The Hungarian microfilm collection was donated to the Holocaust Center in about 1992, 1993 by, I guess, the father of Hungarian Jewry, Randolph Braham. Randolph Braham himself was a survivor, but Following his time in Europe, he came to America and started writing about the Holocaust in Hungary. To do his work, and he was a very serious scholar, he went back to Germany and collected and asked a Jewish Federation of Hungarian Jews to microfilm important documents that were found in the Hungarian archives. The ones that he collected were numbered 184 reels, and they sat for years in our archive, and no one was using them. A Hungarian survivor came to the center. Her name is Clara Garbon-Radnati, and she wanted to do something that was meaningful. So I put one and one together, and she agreed to create an index to these microfilms. The index is on our website. The index is keyword searchable. And at the moment, in order to use those microfilms, you have to come to the Holocaust Center to use them. However, we hope sometime in the very near future to put the actual documents online. And I think that will allow people all over the world to find information about their family, the deportations, and the decrees that the Hungarians gave to the Jews of Hungary, Greater Hungary, I should say.
So many Jews came to Detroit through Canada. Have you ever checked with the synagogues in Canada for artifacts?
No. There is a Holocaust Museum Center in Toronto, and I don't believe that it would be appropriate to send out flyers asking them to give us their special treasures. However, because Windsor is so close, much closer than to Toronto, we were very, very lucky to have Windsor survivors come to our center, speak, give us materials, and share their stories with us. So it's not a closed door at all. There is a lot of cooperation between our communities.
Are tours of the library still, will they be available after COVID?
Not just tours, also research. Whenever someone comes in, I always ask them, why are you interested? And normally it's because someone in their family had a connection to the Holocaust, either a liberator, someone who fought in World War II, or a child or distant relative of someone who was in the Holocaust.
What is Germany doing to deter Nazi activity?
They're doing their best. They have a very, well, I'm not the right person to answer that question. I read the news the same as everyone else. And I also feel that there's so much more behind the scenes that go behind those headlines. So I'm not really the right person to answer the question.
Does the Holocaust Museum have a copy of Steven Spielberg's Shoah project?
You're asking two different things. Of the project, if you're referring to the oral history program, the oral histories are on the Shoah Foundation website, and in order to view them, you have to become an access site. And yes, we are an access site, but we also have another project in that we also have given the Shoah Foundation our oral histories, and they have already been digitized, and eventually they will be cataloged along with all the others.
Please speak about the oral history collection.
The oral history collection that was put together by the Holocaust Memorial Center started in about 1982, with a few exceptions. There were one or two that were started in, that were given to us from, that were recorded in about the late 1970s. But for the most part, in 1982, we only had audio. So between 1982 and about 1985, we recorded some 128 audio tapes. These were, for the most part, from Michigan. Starting in 1984 and 85, we started documenting the oral histories in VHS tape, and we used the 3/4-inch tape as the master tape. As technology advanced, we went from that to DVC Pro to DVD, and now we're doing everything on the server as the archive source. And we also have DVD copies available for viewing in our library.
And among the treasures that you shared with us today, is there one or a story about one that you find particularly meaningful?
Every one of them is. I told you a little bit about each one, but I'll give you something I didn't tell you about, and that is there was a man who came into the library who was very tall, very straight, and he came over to the desk and said, "I am a survivor." And then he turned around and had to compose himself. He came back and he said, "I'm from the city of Marsh." He was taken with his mother and grandfather to Gurs, and he was separated from them. And he wrote to, or rather, letters were sent to his mother and his grandfather. And that was that. I went to the Memorial Book Collection. His name, this is public information. It appeared in our newsletter. And his name was Rolf Hess. So I went to the Marsh Memorial Book, and they list the people there and a little bit about each person. And in the section on Hess, the Hess family, there was a note that read, that was written in German, that said, "And we do not know what happened to Rolf Hess." And I asked him again, "What is your name?" And he told me. "What is your mother's name? And what is your grandfather's name?" And sure enough, they said, they don't know what happened to him. Well, this started a new story for him. He thought he didn't have anyone. He didn't thought he was recorded. He didn't know anything. So I published a little article in one of our newsletters. And then, sure enough, someone wrote in saying, "My grandmother is the one who wrote the letters for Rolf Hess that went to Gurs." And after some time, Rolf Hess and the lady who wrote the letters met in New York. It was very, very moving.
One more question that's come in. When non-Jews come, do they ask or are they told about the Michigan Jewish community, including survivors who came here and Michigan families who lost family?
That's a strange question, you'll excuse me, because when someone walks in, we don't ask if they're Jewish or non-Jewish. And very often, there are many, many, many non-Jews who served, and they want to know about their families too. They want to know what happened to their relative. And it's, if they say they are Jewish, if we look in one source, if I never ask, but it doesn't really matter. This is a legacy for everyone. And even though a person may have a book or a story written about them, we all have to learn the lessons of the Holocaust.
So I believe that covers all of the questions that have come in on my side. Just give it a couple more seconds and just make sure I got them all. Okay. Attendees, please join me in thanking Feiga Weiss for her expertise today and in honoring her as the 2020 Leonard N. Simons History Maker Awardee. We are so proud and humbled and amazed by the work that you do. Thank you. And thank you to all attendees for being here today. We'll look forward to seeing you on another Zoom very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you.